Pivot tables behave a bit differently than other Excel workbook elements, so you need to use a few slightly different techniques to select, move, copy, and delete them within your workbook. I'll demonstrate those techniques in this movie. My sample file is the Manage 0108 workbook, and you can find it in the Chapter 1 folder of your exercise files collection. I'm currently on Sheet 1 of the workbook, and you see here that I have a small pivot table with category sales broken down by year. You might not know, but every pivot table has a name by which you can refer to it. That's useful in formulas and also any macro code you create. If you want to see or even edit the name of your pivot table, you can click any cell within that pivot table, and then on the Analyze contextual tab of the ribbon, look over at the far left in the pivot table group, and you'll see the pivot table name box. In this case, this pivot table is named Pivot Table 1. If you click in the box, you're able to edit the name. In this case, I will call it Category PT and press Enter, and my pivot table now has a new name. The name of the pivot table doesn't really affect what we're doing in this movie, but it made sense to include this topic here. Now let's say that you want to clear a pivot table. That is, get rid of all of its fields, all of its formatting, all of its filters, but not get rid of the pivot table itself. To do that, click any cell within the pivot table, and then go to the Analyze contextual tab of the ribbon, which we're already on. Then in the Actions group, click the Clear button. If your screen is wide enough and your resolution is high enough, you might see this as a separate group. Click that. And then you have two options, although in this case only one is available, Clear All, and you could also clear filters, but we don't have any filters in play right now, so I'll click Clear All, and the pivot table is cleared, but it remains in place. If you want to undo the clear, you can press Ctrl-Z and bring everything back. Now let's say that you want to move a pivot table. To do that, click any cell within the pivot table, and again, on the Analyze Contextual tab in the Actions group, click Move Pivot Table. It will ask you where you want to move it. In this case, you can do a new worksheet or an existing worksheet. So I will select a new worksheet. Let me see, it's currently Sheet 1, A3. So I'll click the Contract Dialog button here. And then I'll click the Move Target sheet. And we were in cell A3 before, so I'll click A3 here. Click the Expand Dialog button and click OK. And the pivot table has been moved. Now you note that there are some formatting irregularities, so you might need to resize your columns like I'm doing here. But in any case, the pivot table is now here. And if we go back and look at Sheet 1, we'll see that it's gone. And of course, as before, if I press Ctrl-Z through all of the changes that I made, then it comes back to Sheet 1. If you want to copy a pivot table, then click any cell within the pivot table, and then on the Analyze contextual tab of the ribbon, yes, we spent a lot of time there, click the Select button, and again, if your screen is wide enough, this could be a separate group, and click Entire Pivot Table. Now the entire pivot table is selected. To copy it, press Ctrl-C, and then we'll go to the Copy Target worksheet. So I'll click its Sheet tab here, and then I'll click in cell A3 and press Ctrl-V. And you see that I get the pivot table again. And I'll select columns A through D and double-click to expand the columns. If I go back to Sheet 1, then I see that the pivot table is still there. If you want to convert a pivot table to a regular cell range, then all you need to do is select it. In this case, I'll go to Copy Target worksheet, and I'll click any cell in the pivot table, then on the Analyze tab, select and Entire Pivot Table. Now I'll press Ctrl-C to copy it, and then I'll use a sequence to paste only the values. So I'll press the Alt key. That brings up the keyboard controls for the ribbon. I'll press H to go to the Home tab, V for paste, and V for values. And you can see that even though I have selected a cell within what used to be the pivot table, Excel doesn't recognize it as a pivot table. It is only a cell range. So again, if you want to copy a pivot table's data and structure, but paste it as a regular cell range, then you can use the sequence I just showed you. Finally, if you want to delete a pivot table, I'll go back to sheet 1. You can select the entire pivot table. It's currently selected here, and I won't go through the sequence again. Then just press the delete key, and it's gone. And you'll see that it is no longer recognized as a pivot table. With these techniques in mind, you will be able to manage your pivot tables effectively.